as we hit modern thought and postmodern thought, the only way that the church can save itself, it believes, is to go back to the Bible as authority. And that movement we call neo-orthodoxy. Neo-orthodoxy, because orthodox means correct beliefs, so it's the renewing of correct beliefs, renewing of the beliefs and the doctrines of the church and the authority of the Bible. And the neo-orthodox movement is still among us, and there is even postmodern forms of neo-orthodox thinking. I want to defend it just for 1 second, and then I think we can talk about its troubling side. But here's the defense. One of the things that's very strong about neo-orthodox thinking is that the Bible is not related to human culture. And so when human culture goes awry, goes wrong, the Bible is the judgment on culture. And that kind of theology is very important for liberation theology. Because when human society goes wrong, and it was born out of the Second World War, Nazi Germany, it was the voice against the movement, the extreme movement involved in Nazi Germany, the National Socialist Party. It was the voice of judgment, that you're wrong. It was the independence of the church. This is evil. This is incorrect. We cannot go this way. It's the voice from outside, the voice that calls for justice. So that's the power of this theology, and it works because the Bible is outside. It's the voice from outside. It's the authority. It's the heaviness. But the problem, of course, with neo-orthodoxy is the other side. It ignores sometimes that human beings are involved in judging what is justice. And so, of course, now, for us, today in 2015, the neo-orthodox side is usually against something like same-sex marriage or against evolution or something like this. And using the same structure of theology, the Bible says. So it can backfire. But I always think it's important to respect a little bit the power of that theology when it comes to justice questions, if it's on the other side of the coin, and the ability to say no to things that have really gone wrong. But it doesn't have relativity, neo-orthodoxy. In other words, it's not open to variety. It's not open to cultural variation. It's not open to sexual variation. It's not open to some of the big questions that are really important to us today. So the other way that theology went is into this postmodern theology. And now we're back to nominalism. That's why I brought it up. That theology is a human creation. We create it out of our languages. We create it out of our cultures. We create it out of our opinions. We create it out of our insecurities. We create it out of power structures. We create it out of institutions. But religion, theology, is our creation. We've made it. And it has pluralistic forms and pluralistic languages, or messages, if you like, or theologies, because we are pluralistic. Human beings are pluralistic. We're varied. So our creation, religion, is going to vary. So in postmodern thought, what religion ends up being, and now we're coming back a little bit to Plato, but in a modern way. What is religion? Is it knowledge? No, it's not knowledge. It's performance. It's a way of performing the world. It's a way of creating the world. And does it go wrong? Yes, it goes wrong because we go wrong. And we create horrible things. But can it go right? Yes, it can go right, too. Because we can create other things that are positive and good. All right, so how do you decide which is which in postmodern thought? It's not easy, But this is how you do it. Back to nominalism. You decide which is which on the basis of covenant. How you speak, how you relate, how you name, how you create the world. Relationships create integrity. That's postmodern thought. So postmodernity was able to take on very big questions, questions of power and abuse of power. We're still in the postmodern times. Take on the big question of colonialism and post-colonialism. Take on the question of God and now post-God. Okay? The performing of God and not the God as a subject or a being or an existing thing. And religion and now post-religion. And look at this, Christianity and now post-Christianity, which is the performance of Christianity and not the truth claim of Christianity. How does Christianity perform, create reality as a religion? How does it create relationship as a religion to others? That's the postmodern stuff. And what's the answer? That's what's great about postmodernity. It's still a touch of Plato. The answer is you. How do you answer the question? Because that's how you perform. How you perform the answer or reality. It's you. We perform it. How does this community perform it? That's postmodernity. How are we going to create religion here, or create Christianity, or post-Christianity? That's the postmodern question. Now, I'll just go through these slides. I have no idea if what I said relates. See, that's what my problem is. I get on these tangents and I go, and then what I prepared is totally different. But that was last night. But here's God. The greatness and the tragedy of God. Because in postmodern thought, remember, God's now performance. We create God. That's the postmodern thing, through our languages and our cultures and our histories. So understanding God is profoundly understanding history, context, how people thought. Remember, God in the Middle Ages is going to be a different God because that's a different context, different society, different way of thinking, different kind of knowledge. Respect the Middle Ages. As much as we want to say they were crazy, we still have to respect them because that's the way they performed reality. And we got to understand it because it's part of our past. The tragedy of God is that it's our God is our creation. And if you look at history, the Romans and the Greeks loved God. They loved God as a non-passionate, immovable, ultimate reality. They loved the idea of that. That's part of our history. But is that God? No, that's a performance of God, right? That's the way they created God. And it became part of our history. We often have an image of God as immovable, no passion, highly authoritative. The Bible likes God with passion and emotion, a very different God. God's a character in the Bible. And the Christian church does both. We love both the big authority, high God who's far away, and then, of course, we love God to come in and give the final word. So the history of God gives us God the way we want God. How do you want God? A warrior, an immovable source of being, a principle of compassion, principle of justice. That's, again, this new time for us. We got to question this. We've had God in all these ways. We've created God in all these ways. We have to, I'm going to say anyway, we have to take responsibility for God. It's strange to say, but it's true, I think. God's our creation. The greatness of God, it's not all bad. We'll look at Jesus in a next talk. Jesus was very good at using the metaphor and inspiring life, images of life, visions of life. So he was slightly like Plato. Of course, he wasn't Plato, but he was slightly like Plato in the sense that he could use parable to have these little glimmers of difference and alternatives open up, options that could be made alive in people. Thomas Aquinas loved God as that which was just beyond the limits of our reason, so the mystery of God is there in Thomas Aquinas. The mystics love God as absence, nothingness. You can never say who God is in mysticism, because God's unknown. So it's the experience of the unknown in mysticism. See, look, all these great images from our history, and of course, the promise of liberation, the hope of justice, very biblical, strong biblical themes, but also part of the postmodern challenge of justice in the world today. So, has God a future? I'm going to say God does have a future. If in saying yes, we mean this. We mean that God's not somebody in the sky. That we recognize religion is a different way of thinking about the world. It's a metaphorical way, a metaphorical format of knowledge. It's a different kind of human knowledge. So, yes, there's a future for religion if God moves out of literalism and is allowed to be this alternative in human experience. If we recognize God is our own creation, then we might end up taking responsibility for how religion is formulated, and that gives us the opportunity to recreate religion. Christianity doesn't have to remain the same. We can change it, transform it. Because after all, we made it ourselves, and we make it and remake it every time we gather. And is there a future for God? If God is the aspiration for what is not, rather than the defender of what is, then yes, on the scale of the world today, both religion and God, believe it or not, could be very important for a vision of the planet Earth. So, I think I'll leave it at that, if that's okay. And have questions, is that all right? Good timing.
Those who ask questions, I want you to have a microphone. So, Rebecca, sorry. So, anyone like to ask a question?
So, David, are you asking the sort of attempts at constructing God like Gordon Kaufman has in one of his books? Is that the sort of thing that you're proposing?
Yes, it's similar, very similar to what he's doing, absolutely. He was a great theologian.
Gordon Kaufman. Sorry. Go ahead. I'm going to ask you a question. As you're aware, there's something of a heresy trial going on in Canada present with Greta Gospel, and it's around this word God. Yeah. And the press seem to be reporting it with Greta saying, I don't believe in God, and using the word atheist. So do you want to comment on that?
Yes. Yes, no. I mean, I think in the Greta is a part of the progressive family, and of course there's different, and people emphasize different things that are involved in progressive religion. For some people God's okay, for some people God's not okay. But I think on her part, I believe she would say something similar to this. I know her, and we're sort of friends, and we've talked, about, especially about this trial coming up. She's very unspoken, and she likes to take a position, and she's very good at getting media attention. But she's saying, atheism, because she's saying, I don't believe there is a God. But she's saying it in this sort of scientific age, what do we know, what's the evidence? But she does, if you ever went to one of her services, she actually does do religion metaphorically. She doesn't use God language, which is fine. And a lot of progressive people don't want to use God language anymore, and I think that's fine. More life language or something. But religious still provides a kind of sacredness, and I don't even like the word sacred, and that's another thing we can get into, but nevertheless, a kind of So I would say, integrity or respect for life. And it's able to, and she does that. She has this sort of sense of sacredness or respect or integrity for life or the honor of life in her services. But she will say, I think, I don't want to speak for her, but one of the positive things is that she's been able to challenge the church to say, is there room in traditional Christianity for people who want to opt out of God language and develop new forms of religiosity? And the church has to answer. So, good for her. She's forcing the church to answer her whether or not it's going to have room for that. And if it doesn't, personally, I think that's kind of stupid. It's like shooting yourself in the foot, to me. Because that might be the future of religion.
I think all we need to do is hear more.
You need to hear more. Well, I've got one other thing to say, and that is weak theology. And it goes back to Plato again. See, I can't help being a philosopher. I said last night, and I'm trying to remember the name of this tree, so I'm going to mispronounce it again. It's Totara tree. I said, in the idea of Plato is there's the idea of tree. It's kind of transcendental and immaterial, and it's not really a tree, it's tree-ness. There's a tree-ness, a form of tree-ness. And what is it? It's good. It's the perfect tree. It's goodness. So now in my particular way, I come down and at some point in my life, I get taught a little bit and I remember, or I wake up because I come from that world of forms where it's goodness and perfection. And I wake up and I remember, and now I know what treeness is. And so I go around and I see a tree that I've never seen before, and I go, that's a tree. And, somebody was complaining a bit about this. So I thought, maybe I should use another example. I walked into Glenn's home and I saw 2 cats there. I've never seen them before in my life. But I said, well, what are the name of the cats? And he answered me. So this is Platonic thinking, that I already know what cats are, because I know what catness is, somehow. But that's a little bit not as accurate as I that's kind of a popular way of saying it. But what Plato really says is something like this. There's the idea of justice. There's the perfect understanding of justice. We know justice. But there never is justice in the world. So we have laws. But if you're a lawyer, you must be a lawyer in here, you know the law, never confuse the law with justice. But justice is the hope of the law and the aspiration. But justice is not a strong force in the law, it's a weak force. It's a vision of what we might hope the law could be, but it's never what the law will be. But we always need it. We always need the idea of justice because we need the aspiration. And this is kind of Plato. So the forms are not strong. Like we misinterpret the forms as these powerful things that Plato has floating around in the sky. Well, that was Christianity, taking Plato and turning all that stuff into God and heaven. But for Plato, it's all very weak. It never comes to reality. But you need it. It's like the stars that guide the ship. You need it to have the inspiration of justice. We need to have justice even as a weak idea. And goodness is a weak idea. And integrity is a weak idea. We never get it. Because we're in this world of actual relationships, actual life. But we still need this weakness, justice, goodness, integrity, the dreams or the hope. And in some ways, in postmodern thought, here's another one that comes up. God as weakness, the weak God. We still need God because we need the weakness of God. Not the strength of God, but the weakness. that in our world, and as we aspire for justice and goodness, as we aspire to recreate not only the church but society and correct historically skewed relationships, we need a weak God. And I'm not sure about what I think about this, but I'm just saying that because I know this is out there as theology today. We need a weak God because we need that capacity to take the step forward, to move into this reality that we're not going to get, but we still need the picture. And in some ways, historical Jesus stuff, parables are like this. They're weak, they're not strong. They're giving us an alternate reality, an alternate way of being in the world. And we need that alternate, the weak story, because we need the ability to step toward it. Even if we're never really going to reach it perfectly. We're never going to get perfection, but the idea is still important, even though it's present as weakness. And I think that this is a possibility for Christianity. We have the history of having the big story, you know, the big meta-narrative called the meta-narrative, the big strong story. Well, the big strong story doesn't see little people very well. But maybe we start to transform Christianity into a weak religion. Maybe that's good. It's a weak religion. But that's why it's transforming. It doesn't have the big story. But it has a vision. It's capable of carrying a vision or a weakness that we need. And you know, that image kind of works a little bit better with the word justice. We absolutely need the idea of justice. We need justice, but it's a weak force, not a strong force. Well, maybe we need Christianity in the world still, along with other religions. But we need them in weak ways rather than powerful ways. Yeah.
There's a strong thing running through the ancient religions, and it is the search for the true self. In this modern world, it's still a valid search, because you've mentioned a number of things that seem to go around it, but
right.
there seems to be no goal.
Right. The search for the self. Well, you know, I think it's still valid, but it might be a weak search. You know, there might not be the great self. And secondly, in postmodern thinking now, we would start to look at the self as a complex rather than a singularity. So modern thought is like the self is a certain thing, you know, but in postmodern thought, the self is a relationship of things. And so that's why it's more holistic. But there's not a single thing that is who we are. There's this complex, and you kind of have to take care of the whole complex. So that is kind of a weak self, you know what I mean? Not the strong single being, but the weakness of the relationship of all things.
It never asserts itself.
Beg your pardon?
It never asserts itself.
Well, it's funny, it never asserts itself. I think it does assert itself. I'm standing here as doing the best I can at asserting. But what I am, though, like anybody can take me apart or criticize me, because all I am is a bunch of relationships thrown together, and I experience it as a unity, as a self. But there's not any one single thing that's me, really. So if I have a weak understanding of myself, I think I have a little bit of forgiveness. I'm just a kind of a amalgam of things. And I experience the centrality of being. I experience my view of you and my difference, but it's a complex of relationships. So I can take it easy on myself when I misunderstand something, for example.
You sound now as if you're going back beyond Plato to the concept of non-duality, which was current about 3000 BC. the old Hindu rishis in the Indus Valley had this idea, and it's current today, as you have just said.
Yes, I don't quite, and I might be wrong, but I don't totally separate Plato from that. Because I think Christianity is the vehicle that made Plato a bit extreme. All the forms are up in heaven, they're big, powerful, strong. It's God's world, and down here is our world of darkness, blah, blah, blah. Plato is a bit more integrative. You can't have the world of the forms, of the ideas, of the perfections, or the goodness without the physical. The only way to encounter that is through the reality we're in. You know, so Plato has a kind of relationship, but you're right to say that this idea of the integrative self is really found in Hinduism and Buddhism, and also the idea of the complex self not being any single thing but a complex. That's very Buddhist. Yes, so I agree. So it is pre-Platonic in the sense that it doesn't. Plato kind of splits them or brings them into tension like this, you know, and Buddhism and Hinduism do not. They keep it together. Yeah.
I just want to take you up on your talking about justice. Is justice and what is good? You're talking about weak forms of justice and good. But my question really is, where do these ideas of justice and good come from that you talk about? You talk about it as if we all know what it is. But if it doesn't come out from traditions and from the Bible as that form of justice and good, isn't it just, as Richard Dawkins says, a zeitgeist that moves through society, his view moving to ever higher levels, my view of perhaps just being different from what people believed before. So why should we run around pursuing what this generation thinks is good and just?
I remember Bob Funk once said that when he gave talks, he was asked all kinds of questions and he had no idea what the answer was. And so you kind of just make it up on the spot. I think, I'm not sure how to answer that question. I mean, I could go back to, you know, and say, what's the source? See, this is the metaphor of Plato. He's trying to find the source of knowledge, but I would not really use that metaphor, even though I like it because it's helpful to understand another way of thinking. It helps introduce metaphorical thinking apart from scientific thinking. But I think that I'm more postmodern in the sense that I would say the values of justice and equality are learned, and that they are complex values that come out of a history of interrelationship of people and societies, and that we end up learning from our past and recombining and reconnecting things to make it function better. So what equality was in the 17th century, for example, is quite a bit different from what we mean by equality in the 21st century. But that's part of our history. We've recombined it, we've reinvented equality in a certain way. And why did we do that? Well, I don't know how to answer that question except that I want to do that. And that it's important to humanity to do that. And so there's a strength to this weak theology, or the weakness of justice, or justice as a weak force. A weak force, because that just means it's our vision and our hope. But we have to create it. It's not strong enough to create itself. We have to take responsibility for it. And I like doing that. And I feel motivated to do that. And it might purely be nature. That's that motivation. And that just because we are a family. In the end, we're a family. You and I are very similar. Genetics, regardless what history we come out of or ethnic background, human beings are very, very closely related, and we all come out of this basic idea that we've got to protect each other to survive. So let's just give it a natural explanation. Well, I'm motivated by that. So I want justice. Yes?
Could I try to get the definition? Could I try to, the definition of the big creation, if I link it to the next one, if God is aspiration to what is, not rather than a defender of what is but wasn't what it. In the difference between theology and science at the moment and the big gap that exists is the ability to say, in your weakness, sorry, you got it wrong, let's start again. What science is able to do to say this theory was totally off the beam.
Yeah.
We have to just say we made a mistake.
Yes. I definitely think so. Again, I don't want to isolate religion from critical thinking and from technical thinking and the values that science brings, especially to theology and to historical investigation. But I think that is a characteristic of science that is important also in theology. You try a model, you try a way of negotiating yourself in relationship to the world, and it obviously doesn't work. It leaves people out, or it's harmful, or you just made a mistake in it. So you reinvent it. Yes, absolutely.
Yes, I very much agree with what you're saying about science. I don't think it's quite so widely understood that science proceeds out of a metaphor itself. Virtually everything that people identify in popular thought as scientific fact is actually a metaphor. And those metaphors change over time, and of course Thomas Kuhn's structure of scientific revolutions really highlighted that. But there's also one sort of even more esoteric factor, and that is that most science, not all science, most science proceeds these days with mathematics, and in particular statistics. And there's a very famous saying from the world of mathematics that talks about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics, and that to me is the heart of Platonic thought. Not mathematics in an algebraic sense, but mathematics in a geometric sense. And so I very much concur with what you're saying about theory of forms.
Thank you. I should just say that one of the funny things about Richard Dawkins' God delusion, I found, is that you're doing the science until you're proving there's no God, and then you end up in the end with the mystery of science. So it finally does break into religion in a certain way, or into art, when he says, if you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand quantum mechanics. I mean, like, that's just a nice Buddhist phrase to me, and also an openness to mystery, I think. So it's a kind of a metaphorical, a nod to science as metaphor.